They say the frontier is a land of raw ambition and even raw hearts. But what if it's also where human kindness can break the strongest barriers? Picture a sprawling cattle ranch on the dusty plains, a grieving father haunted by old grudges and his fiery daughter, whose compassion defies the harshest laws of the West. One fateful night, she stumbles on a wounded Cherokee warrior hidden beneath the moonlight. She shelters him, risking her life, her family's name, and a father's wrath. Little does she know that single act of mercy will spark a chain of events that shakes their entire world. Caroline Barrett first glimpsed the wounded Cherokee brave on a twilight that bled purple across the Oklahoma sky. As the sun sank behind miles of razor-edged buttes, the newly minted dusk whispered secrets of trouble. The ranch yard was usually still at that hour. Her father, James Barrett, would be dozing off in his battered armchair by the hearth, his old Remington revolver resting at his side. But that night, Caroline felt an unease in the air, so sharp it made her skin prickle. The Barrett Ranch lay on the border of the so-called Indian Territory, about 30 miles from Fort Gibson. Many folks thought James Barrett reckless for settling so close to Cherokee land, but the old man believed in the potential of open country. And indeed, the ranch had once thrived, boasting some of the finest cattle for miles around. Still, money wasn't the only currency on that frontier. Peace was a rarer commodity. Caroline, 20 years old and uncommonly headstrong, was finishing her chores. She brushed down the mare, Daisy feeling the warm breath from the horse flit across her cheek. Outside, coyotes began their nightly chorus, the air heavy with the scent of hay and dust. A single lamp burned in the barn, illuminating half the room in golden swaths. That was when she heard the soft groan. At first she thought Daisy had kicked something loose, but then it came again, low-pained, unmistakably human. Instantly alert, Caroline quietly laid aside the grooming brush. Her heart hammered. In the West you learned to be cautious. This land harbored everything from outlaws to night stalkers. She gripped the handle of the lantern tight and inched her way toward the sound. Near the far corner of the barn, behind some stacked hay bales, Caroline found him. A Cherokee man, no older than 25, with raven black hair braided in 2 plaits. His left arm was slick with blood, a bullet wound. His skin glistened with sweat, and his breath rattled with every inhale. Caroline froze. Her father had warned her about strangers, particularly those from nearby tribes. Tensions in the area had soared that past year, with cattle thefts blamed on Indians, whether or not they were actually involved. Local vigilantes were more than eager to shoot first and ask questions later. If James Barrett found a wounded Cherokee on his property, he might very well finish what some other gunman had started. She should run and find her father, or at least get the ranch hands. But something in the man's eyes made her hesitate. She saw not menace, but desperation. Without words, he pleaded for help. Caroline knelt carefully. "Can you speak?" she whispered, voice catching in her throat. He managed a nod, but grimaced when he tried to sit up. "I'm running wolf," he rasped, finally, in halting English. "Need help." Even as fear fired through her veins, Caroline's compassion overshadowed it. She quickly scanned the barn door. No ranch hands in sight. No father with a loaded weapon. She turned back to him. "Stay still. I'll help you. But you must keep quiet." If her father discovered him, it wouldn't be kindness he'd show. She extended her arm to support him, pushing aside the tatters of his shredded shirt. The bullet wound was deep, still bleeding. Running Wolf winced but did not cry out. His composure, despite agony, impressed her. In the lamplight, she could see the outline of a stylized wolf tattoo across his shoulder, signifying his clan or personal identity. She had no time to spare. With the skill of someone who had often nursed wounded animals, she tore a strip from her own apron and bound it around his arm, applying pressure to stop the bleeding. The stables had a small corner where old blankets were stacked. Caroline pulled one over and gently covered him. "Don't move," she whispered. "I'll come back for you." His dark eyes followed her as she turned to slip out of the barn. A single glance told her that if she did nothing, he might not live until morning. And so, with the weight of a trembling decision on her shoulders, Caroline silently raced across the yard toward the old root cellar. That was where her mother's medicine chest had been stored since her passing 3 years prior. Inside that chest were remnants of bandages, salves, and powders for fever. Her father's bedroom window was dark, which meant he had likely turned in early, exhausted from a day's worth of herding cattle. Caroline pried open the root cellar's wooden door, careful not to let it creak too loudly, and felt her way down the musty steps until she found the trunk where her mother had kept all manner of herbal remedies. She recalled how her mother, Laura Barrett, had taught her the ways of healing, how to clean a wound, how to brew teas that calmed pain, how to whisper an incantation for comfort. She couldn't help but think, if Mother were here, she'd help that out man too. Arms full of supplies, Caroline returned to the barn and crouched beside Running Wolf. He stared at her, with suspicion laced with gratitude. As gently as she could, she poured water from a canteen over the wound, washing away dirt and dried blood. He stiffened, but said nothing. "If I help you," she murmured, "you must promise to keep still. No one can know you're here. It's not safe." He nodded, beads of sweat rolling down his temples. "Thank you," he mumbled through gritted teeth. Caroline bit her lip. She knew there would be consequences. She just didn't know how many lives might be upended by her choice. By the time dawn arrived, Running Wolf was stable though, still feverish. Caroline had sat with him through the night, drifting into an uneasy doze in the hay. As the first rays of sunlight filtered into the barn, she jolted awake to the sound of men's voices outside. The ranch hands were stirring. Baxter Jones, a burly ex-soldier who had fought under Colonel Charles Goodnight in earlier skirmishes against cattle rustlers, walked by the barn door with a metal pail. He was followed by 2 younger men, each talking about the day's tasks. Caroline's heart hammered. If any of them peeked inside, they would see the wounded Cherokee at once. Acting quickly, she hastily gathered the medical supplies, hid them behind some stacked sacks of grain, and threw a blanket of hay over Running Wolf's form. She pressed a finger to her lips. Running Wolf nodded in understanding, swallowing hard to stifle a moan. The barn door creaked open. Baxter Jones stepped in, pail in hand. "Miss Caroline." "You in here?" His gruff voice echoed. Caroline sprung to her feet, dusting off her skirts to appear casual. "Morning, Baxter," she said, feigning a yawn. "I came out early to check on Daisy. She was restless last night." Baxter's sharp eyes scanned the barn. Caroline could almost feel his gaze lingering on the far corner. Her entire body tensed. "She all right?" he asked, stepping closer. Caroline tried to maintain a steady voice. "Seems fine. You know how she gets sometimes with the coyotes howling." He nodded. "Yep, that mare's got a nervous streak. Best keep an eye on her. He turned his back toward Running Wolf's hiding spot, patting Daisy's flank. Well, James wants us to run the cattle down by the creek today. There's talk of some trouble brewing near the reservations again. Heard something about a shootout near the Redwood Bluff. His tone was pointed. If you hear anything unusual, let us know right away. Caroline forced a quick smile. Of course I will. Finally, Baxter left. When the barn door closed, Caroline exhaled, shoulders sagging in relief. She waited a minute, then hurried to the corner. Running Wolf's breathing was shallow but steady. In a faint voice, he whispered, "Thank you for your kindness." She carefully lifted the hay to let him breathe more freely. "I don't know what happened to you or why you were shot," Caroline said. "But if word gets out, I'm hiding you." Her words caught in her throat. "My father, he's a hard man. Not cruel, but he's lost too much." Running Wolf blinked. "You can't tell him?" Caroline shook her head. Not yet. Though the day had just begun, it stretched before her with uncertainty. She needed a plan how to hide a wounded Cherokee on a working ranch without raising suspicion. The men would be in and out of the barn. She resolved to move him somewhere safer, but where, her eyes flicked to the old root cellar. They kept extra supplies down there, but it was rarely visited unless they were short on feed or mother's old herbs. In the early morning hush, Caroline knew that was her best option, at least until he could walk on his own. She helped Running Wolf to his feet. Each movement sent a wave of pain through his body. But with her support, they managed to sneak out of the barn and cross the yard. The ranch hands were hitching horses on the far side, giving them just enough time to slip into the cellar unseen. The root cellar was cramped, damp, and smelled of earth. Shelves lined the walls holding glass jars of peaches, pickles, and green beans. A small cot lay folded against one wall, left over from the days when her mother used to nurse sick calves. Caroline quickly lowered the cot, layering it with old blankets. Running Wolf settled onto it, wincing. "I owe you my life," he said, voice earnest. Caroline worked quickly, setting out a basin of water and rummaging for the herbal remedies. "You owe me nothing," she replied, her tone resolute. "But if I don't keep you hidden, I could lose everything. So let's keep quiet, and I'll do what I can." A faint smile curved on Running Wolf's lips. "I will be silent as the wind." Caroline nodded. She pressed a palm to his forehead, still burning with fever. She had no time to dwell on her own fear. For now, she needed to nurse him. Carefully, she undid the makeshift bandage, cleaned the wound again, and applied a paste of comfrey and willow bark her mother had once used. It smelled bitter, but it would help fight infection. She was finishing up when a sudden voice called outside. "Caroline." "Caroline, where you at?" "Her father." She froze, glancing at the cellar door. "Stay quiet," she breathed to Running Wolf. Steeling herself, Caroline climbed the steps and emerged into the sunlight, forcing a casual posture. She left the cellar door open, just enough not to draw suspicion, but also not reveal the occupant within. James Barrett stood a few yards away. He was in his late 50s, broad-shouldered, and bearing the weight of countless hard seasons. He wore a dusty Stetson and had a rifle slung across his back. As Caroline approached, she noticed the deep lines etched on his brow. Worry, always worry. "I've been calling," he said, narrowing his eyes. "What are you doing at the cellar?" Caroline gestured vaguely. "Gathering old herbs, Father. I thought I might prepare a tonic. My throat's been scratchy." She coughed feebly to sell the lie. Her father gave a curt nod. "We've got bigger concerns, child. Come with me." He started walking toward the yard. Caroline followed 1,000 worries, swirling in her mind. Is something wrong? James paused by the hitching post where Baxter and the other ranch hands readied the horses. There was a shooting last night near Redwood Bluff, he said, voice grim. Some folks say it was outlaws. Others say Cherokee renegades. A U.S. Marshal from Fort Smith was shot dead, so tensions are high. Men around here are itching for revenge, whether or not they know the facts. Caroline's stomach twisted. Redwood Bluff. Could that be where Running Wolf was wounded? She prayed silently that no one would connect the dots. We're going to move the cattle further south for a few weeks, just to keep them out of harm's way. James continued. And I'm warning you, Caroline, if you see any strangers, especially Indians lurking around, you come, tell me. I'm not looking to start a war, but I won't risk our ranch. Her heart thundered, but she forced a composed expression. Yes, Pa. I'll be careful. He nodded, eyes narrowing slightly. Good. While the ranch hands mounted up and drove the cattle, James and Caroline walked back toward the house. He pulled out a worn piece of paper, flattening it between calloused fingers. I got a letter from Colonel Charles Goodnight, he said. He might pass through next month, looking to trade. We need to keep the ranch secure, present ourselves as strong. We can't do that if we're tangling with outlaws or Cherokees. Caroline swallowed hard. The mention of Colonel Goodnight, a prominent rancher famed for his epic cattle drives, usually excited James. But now all she felt was dread. If Goodnight arrived, and trouble was brewing with the Cherokee, the entire region could erupt. She could only imagine the violence if folks discovered she was harboring someone from the tribe. Yet through the fear, a flicker of resolve burned within her. She might be her father's daughter, but she had her mother's heart, and that heart told her she was doing the right thing. Pa, she said softly, we can be strong without harming innocents. James gave her a sidelong glance. Innocence. Sometimes it's hard to tell friend from foe out here. He sighed. Finish your chores, Caro. I'll be out on the range. Once he was gone, Caroline waited until the coast was clear. Then, heart-pounding, she returned to the cellar. She knelt beside Running Wolf, who was drifting in and out of a feverish sleep. Gently she pressed a cool rag to his forehead. We have to keep you hidden, she whispered. No one can know you're here. Running Wolf's lids fluttered. He gave a weak nod, swallowing with difficulty. I understand. Caroline gazed at him, worry gnawing at her. How would she keep her father, the ranch hands, and possibly an entire town from discovering this wounded stranger? How long until Running Wolf's people came looking for him? In that moment, Caroline realized she was gambling with everything she held dear. But just one look at his trembling figure reminded her why, if she turned him away, he would surely die. Over the next few days, Caroline slipped into a delicate routine of deception. At sunrise, she'd tend to her regular chores, feeding the chickens, hauling water, and cleaning the house. Her father was too busy with ranch matters to linger, but the hands often roamed about the property. She had to watch carefully to avoid being followed. When the opportunity arose, she'd sneak away to the cellar to tend Running Wolf's wounds, bring him food, and check on his fever. He was recovering slowly, color returning to his cheeks, though the pain in his arm persisted. She worried infection might set in, but the salve seemed to help. In hushed whispers, they began to learn about each other. Running Wolf told her he was part of a small band of Cherokee who had settled not far from the Redwood Bluff. He had traveled with a friend now missing and encountered riders who opened fire without warning. He didn't know if they were bandits or vigilantes. All he knew was that a bullet tore through his arm, and he escaped on foot in the darkness. Caroline told him a bit about her life on the ranch, about her mother, who had died of fever, leaving an emptiness in the household. She explained her father's bitterness, how some local outlaws had raided them years ago, killing her older brother. James had never recovered from that loss. He had grown wary of strangers, especially those who roamed the land without fences or borders, like some of the tribes. He blames the Cherokee for too many things, she admitted quietly. Running Wolf listened, sympathy softening his features. "We've lost people too," he murmured. "Forced to leave our homelands, marched west. Many died. Sorrow doesn't belong to one side only." Their conversations were brief, always overshadowed by the fear of discovery. Each footstep above made Caroline freeze, praying it wasn't her father or Baxter creeping down for supplies. By the 5th day, Running Wolf managed to stand on his own, though his arm was still bandaged and tender. Caroline found an old shirt in her mother's trunk, plain, but enough to cover him so he wouldn't stand out if he was forced to move quickly. Each day, townsfolk brought news of rising tensions. Baxter reported that a U.S. Marshal's posse was combing the territory for a Cherokee suspect connected to the Redwood Bluff shooting. The rumor was that some local men had formed a vigilante group. They believed any native they found might be the culprit. Caroline's chest constricted. She had to get Running Wolf to safety before those vigilantes came sniffing around. But as the days passed, Running Wolf grew restless. "I must return to my people," he told her one evening. "They'll be worried." "My friend, I don't know his fate." Caroline nodded, a knot forming in her throat. "But you're not strong enough yet. Another day or two. I can't protect you if you run into a patrol." Reluctantly, he agreed to wait. That same night, as Caroline left the cellar after tending him, she found her father standing in the yard, the moonlight illuminating his stern features. She nearly jumped out of her skin. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, voice low. She composed herself quickly. I was restless. Thought I'd get some air." Her heart pounded at the thought he might have followed her steps. James studied her. "You've been sneaking out often these nights. Something on your mind?" Caroline mustered a smile. "Just bad dreams," she lied, remembering the raid that took Henry from us. Henry was her older brother, gone these 3 years. Mentioning him never failed to soften her father's gaze, if only a little. He nodded, the lines on his face deepening with sorrow. "I miss him too. You best get some rest." She forced herself to walk calmly back into the house, though her legs quivered like jelly. She wondered how long she could keep this secret. All it would take was one slip, a single unlatched door, or a half-heard conversation, and her father would discover the truth. On a scorching afternoon a few days later, a new tension gripped the ranch. Caroline saw the dust cloud first riders approaching, the sun glinting off their weapons. She hurried inside to warn her father. By the time they emerged, 5 men in uniform reined their horses in front of the main house. The lead man tipped his hat, revealing keen gray eyes beneath. He introduced himself as Lieutenant Avery Porter of the U.S. Army, dispatched from nearby Fort Gibson to investigate the Redwood Bluff incident. James Barrett, flanked by Baxter, walked onto the porch, keeping a firm grip on his rifle. "What's the government want with us?" he demanded, not bothering to hide his suspicion. Lieutenant Porter was polite but insistent. "We've reason to believe a wounded Cherokee might be hiding in these parts. We're visiting the local ranches to see if anyone has spotted him." He produced a small slip of paper with a rough sketch of a Cherokee man with braided hair. Caroline's heart thudded so hard she feared it would burst. The image looked just like Running Wolf. James shrugged, though his tone was wary. "Haven't seen any Indians around here, let alone a wounded one." Porter's gaze swept over Caroline, who stood slightly behind her father. "And you notice anyone prowling near your property?" Caroline forced herself to meet his eyes. "No, sir," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Baxter interjected. "There's plenty of them roaming the territory, though. Could be anywhere. This ranch is quiet, Lieutenant. We keep watch." Porter studied their faces, then nodded. "We're also investigating the murder of a U.S. Marshal who died at Redwood Bluff. Locals claim it was a Cherokee ambush. If you see or hear anything, contact us immediately." James nodded curtly. "We will." With that, Lieutenant Porter and his men rode off, leaving a tense silence in their wake. Caroline let out a quiet breath of relief, but her father's gaze turned on her cold and penetrating. "That official looked serious," James said. "If the army's sniffing around, they might check barns and outbuildings next time." Caroline swallowed. "I guess so." He studied her a moment, then turned away. "Baxter, do a thorough sweep of the ranch. If there's anyone lurking around, I want 'em found." Caroline's pulse raced. Baxter's sweep was precisely what she dreaded. She made an excuse to fetch water from the well, quickly weaving between outbuildings until she reached the cellar door. Slipping inside, she found Running Wolf sitting upright, a determined light in his eyes. "I must leave tonight," he said, before she even spoke. "I overheard the horses outside. Soldiers." She pressed a water skin into his hand, her voice trembling. "Yes, you're right. They showed your picture to my father." She paused. "But how will you go? You're still hurt. And the vigilantes could be anywhere." He wiped sweat from his brow. "Better I face them than risk your family. You've done enough." Caroline's mind whirled. Perhaps if she helped him get a few miles away, he could slip through the hills to find his people. But the soldiers, the vigilantes Baxter's patrol so many dangers. "Give me until dark," she whispered. "We'll figure something out." He nodded, though his jaw was set. "Thank you." She hurried out, scanning the yard. Already she saw Baxter leading 2 men toward the barn, presumably to search. She had precious little time to plan. That evening after supper, she waited until her father fell asleep in his chair, exhausted from the day's labor. Then, with a pounding heart, she gathered supplies from the kitchen bread-dried meat, a small canteen. She retrieved an old revolver from her mother's locked trunk, one that James had all but forgotten about. If Running Wolf encountered trouble, he might need some protection. Under the cover of darkness, Caroline slipped back to the cellar. Running Wolf stood arm still bandaged, but able to walk. She handed him the makeshift bundle. "There's a path behind the ranch that leads to the creek. It's less traveled. If you follow it west, you'll reach Redwood Bluff eventually." Running Wolf took the bundle, gratitude and something else, admiration, shining in his eyes. "I won't forget your kindness." Caroline offered him the revolver. "It's old, but it'll fire a bullet, just in case." He accepted it solemnly. "My name, Running Wolf, might be scorned by your people, but remember me differently, as a friend." She felt tears prick her eyes. "I will." They slipped out of the cellar, creeping around the side of the house. The moon was bright, but shadows fell where the ranch house blocked the light. Still, every step threatened to betray them with a crunch of gravel or a rustle of grass. Caroline led him to the corral fence, where a gap opened onto a narrow path. The hush of the night buzzed in her ears. He paused at the fence line, turning back to her. For a moment, the weight of their shared secret pressed down on them, forging a bond that transcended all the distrust swirling around them. He gave a final nod, then slipped away into the darkness. Caroline lingered there, her heart torn between relief that he was no longer in immediate danger and a sudden, inexplicable sadness that he was gone. Days passed. Caroline tried to focus on her chores, act normal, and squash any suspicion from the ranch hands. Baxter roamed the property more diligently than ever, but he found no signs of intruders. Her father remained distant, though occasionally she caught him studying her with a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. One afternoon, the tension in the air sparked like lightning. A group of local men rode onto the ranch brandishing rifles. Caroline recognized one as Clint Rawlings, a notorious hothead who had a reputation for stirring up trouble. With him were 3 other men, faces grim. James Barrett confronted them by the hitching post. "What's all this about?" he demanded, hand hovering near his gun belt. Rawlings spat onto the ground. "Heard the army's out hunting a Cherokee. Word is, you're not cooperating as well as some folks think you should." James' bristled eyes narrowing. "This is my land, Rawlings. I'm cooperating just fine. If the army wants to come back, they know where to find me. I don't need you playing deputy." Rawlings sneered. "Well, maybe you've got something to hide. We aim to search your property ourselves." Caroline stepped forward, adrenaline surging. "That's not your place," she challenged. "Only the law can force a search." Rawlings scowled. "Law's too slow. A U.S. Marshal's been murdered. We can't stand by. We've lost men to these savages before." Caroline felt anger flare within her, but her father raised a hand, cautioning her to stay silent. He turned his steely gaze on Rawlings. "I know your kind, Rawlings. You're looking for a fight. There's no Cherokee here. You can turn around." Rawlings gripped his rifle. A few tense seconds ticked by. Then the man snorted. "Fine. We'll be on our way. But if we catch wind, you're harboring that savage, you'll answer to, more than just me with that." The men wheeled their horses and galloped away, leaving a cloud of dust and a seething tension behind them. James exhaled, shoulders slumping. Caroline saw a flash of weariness in his eyes. "Damn fools. They're going to start a war, if they're not careful." She swallowed, remembering how her father had once harbored his own resentments. Now faced with vigilantes on his doorstep, it seemed he'd drawn a line. "Pa," she began hesitantly. "You did the right thing." He nodded absently. "We'll see about that." That night, while Caroline sat beside the fireplace, sewing a torn shirt, James quietly approached. He lowered himself into the armchair opposite her, the firelight flickering across his weathered face. "Caroline," he said gently, "I know you've been different these past few weeks. Is something troubling you?" Her heart quickened. "No, Pa. Just worried about the unrest." He studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "I don't want trouble, but I also don't want to see good folks killed on either side. I lost Henry to a band of thieves, but the sheriff never found out if they were white or Indian. Grief can twist a man's mind, make him blame whoever's convenient. I won't lie. I resented the tribes for a long time. But now—" He trailed off, eyes glistening. Caroline set aside her sewing. She had never heard him speak this openly about the pain that had weighed on him for years. I'm not saying I've changed my stripes, he continued, voice gruff, but I don't want a bloodbath. He stood abruptly. I'm turning in. Good night. She watched him go, torn between guilt for lying and relief that maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't have shot Running Wolf on sight. But the risk had still been too great, and it wasn't over yet. Caroline's life found a semblance of calm for about a week, until an unexpected visitor appeared at dusk. A Cherokee woman named Elise, accompanied by 2 men. They arrived on horseback wearing traditional garments and riding with quiet confidence up to the ranch house. Caroline heard their approach and rushed outside only to freeze at the sight. James Barrett and Baxter emerged from the barn, rifles in hand. The Cherokee woman lifted her palm in a gesture of peace. "We come to speak, not to fight," she said, in surprisingly clear English. Caroline's father, eyes narrowed, gestured with his rifle. "State your business." Elise dismounted slowly, her hands still raised. "I am Elise, wife of the band's leader. We seek a man from our tribe, Running Wolf. He was wounded and went missing." Her gaze swept over the ranch. "Some say he might have come this way." Caroline's pulse raced. She felt a jolt of panic. How could these people have known he'd been here? Had Running Wolf told them? Or had they tracked him? James's expression flickered. "Don't know what you're talking about." Elise's voice quavered with the tremor of suppressed worry. "He has not returned to us. We fear the worst." Baxter shifted his stance. "Maybe he's dead. This land ain't friendly to any man walking alone." Elise's 2 male companions shared a glance, anger darkening their features. But Elise put a hand on each of their shoulders, maintaining composure. "We only ask if you have seen him." A heavy silence weighed the air. Caroline's father shook his head firmly. "No Cherokee on this ranch," he repeated. "You best move on." Caroline's heart ached at the lie. She caught Elise's eyes for a moment, saw the flicker of desperation. Elise nodded sadly and turned to mount her horse. But before she did, she looked directly at Caroline just for a second and gave the faintest tilt of her head, as if sensing something in the young woman's expression. Then they rode away, dust swirling in their wake. James exhaled. "I don't like this." Baxter grunted. "Might be more of them lurking. We should stand guard." As the men stalked off to fortify the ranch perimeter, Caroline stood rooted to the spot. Guilt and sorrow warred within her. Running Wolf's people were searching for him. She had helped him escape, but had no idea where he was now. If they found him, would that bring the soldiers down on them? Would it spark more violence? That night, Caroline slipped away, saddled her mare, Daisy, and rode quietly to the outskirts of the ranch. She couldn't let it end like this. Perhaps if she found Elise in the nearby foothills, she could tell them that Running Wolf had healed enough to leave. They deserved to know he was alive. She rode into the moonlit hills, guided only by the glow of stars and the distant hoot of an owl. After nearly an hour of searching, she spotted a small camp nestled in a grove of cottonwoods. A single fire burned around which sat Elise and a few others. Taking a deep breath, Caroline dismounted and approached with caution. At the edge of their camp, she lifted her empty hands in a gesture of peace. The men jumped to their feet, but Elise quickly recognized her. "Wait," Elise said in Cherokee, then switched to English. "You are the rancher's daughter." Caroline nodded, nerves quivering. "I'm Caroline Barrett. I came to tell you what I know about Running Wolf." A hush fell. Finally, Elise gestured for her to sit by the fire. "Speak." Caroline took a seat on a fallen log, acutely aware of the guarded expressions around her. The men's hands hovered near their knives. She cleared her throat. "Running Wolf was on our ranch wounded," she admitted, voice low. "I hid him and helped him heal. But he left about a week ago. I haven't seen him since." A ripple of surprise crossed Elise's face. One of the men muttered something in Cherokee, and Elise responded firmly. Then she turned back to Caroline. "Why would you do this?" Caroline stared at the fire, gathering her courage. "Because it was the right thing. He would have died if I didn't help. And because, despite everything, I believe we're meant to show mercy, not cruelty." Elise regarded her with a gentle warmth. "You took a great risk." Caroline shrugged, tears burning her eyes. "I couldn't just let him die." A flicker of relief passed over Elise's face. "Thank you. If he left a week ago, he is likely trying to find our band or perhaps searching for his friend. We shall continue looking." She placed a hand over Caroline's in a gesture of gratitude. Suddenly, the other man's head snapped up. Horses approached in the distance. A moment later, voices carried on the night wind. Caroline's blood froze. She recognized them. Baxter and a few ranch hands, probably on patrol, and if they found her here, with the Cherokee. Elise's men doused the fire quickly. "We must go," one hissed. Caroline sprang to her feet, heart pounding. She could only imagine how Baxter would interpret this scene. "I'll lead them away," she whispered fiercely. "You have a head start." Elise's eyes widened. "It's too dangerous." Caroline shook her head, voice resolute. "Go now. I'll manage." Elise squeezed her hand in thanks. Then the band gathered their horses and melted into the darkness with silent efficiency. Caroline hastily mounted Daisy and trotted in the opposite direction, urging her mare to kick up enough noise to draw the search party. Sure enough, Baxter's lantern came bobbing across the ridge. "Who goes there?" Baxter's voice boomed. Caroline forced a shaky laugh, adopting an innocent tone. "It's me. Caroline Daisy got spooked, so I took her out for a ride to calm her." Baxter shone the lantern in her face. "Damn it, Miss Barrett. You could get yourself killed out here. Thought you might be that Cherokee gang." Caroline feigned exasperation. "Just me, Baxter. Let's go back." He nodded gruffly, but suspicion flickered in his eyes. "Yeah, let's go." As they rode home, Caroline felt her pulse gradually slow, though her thoughts still raced. She had narrowly avoided a confrontation that could have been deadly, but for how long could she juggle these secrets and alliances? Rumors spread through the region that vigilante groups were clashing with various tribes. Lieutenant Porter's soldiers had arrested a few suspects, but with no clear evidence, tensions only escalated. Meanwhile, Caroline lay awake at night, praying Running Wolf had reached safety. A week later, the ranch was jolted by a grim sight. Near midday, one of the ranch hands spotted something by the fence line. When Caroline and her father rushed over, they found a battered, unconscious man. His shirt was torn, chest bruised, a bullet grazed across his ribs. His skin was the color of bronze. James froze. Another. Cherokee Baxter hurried over, kneeling. "He's alive, but barely." James turned to Caroline, expression hardened by uncertainty. "We can't take in every wounded Cherokee that shows up on our doorstep. What if he's the one who killed that Marshal?" Caroline's chest clenched. She recognized the battered face Running Wolf's friend. Perhaps. He was certainly Cherokee, and he was in a dire state. She knelt quickly. "Pa, if we turn him away, he'll die." Her father hesitated, knuckles whitening around his rifle. We might get in trouble. The army's looking for fugitives. Those vigilantes could come any day. Caroline locked eyes with him. Then let me tend him at least until he can speak. The man was barely conscious. Maybe he can tell us what really happened. James's jaw tightened, torn between fear and compassion. Finally, he heaved a sigh. Fine. But do it in the barn. I won't have the house searched and labeled as traitors. Relief washed through Caroline. She waved over 2 ranch hands, instructing them to help carry the wounded man into the barn. James allowed it, though he refused to leave them alone, his rifle slung over his shoulder as he watched from the door. Caroline fetched clean water and bandages, carefully cleaning the bullet graze. Her father hovered, silent, brows furrowed. She could sense his internal battle. After a while, the man stirred, eyes flickering open. Pain etched his features. Caroline leaned close, speaking softly. Can you understand me? He coughed, blood flecking his lips. Then in strained English, water. She held a canteen to his lips. After a few desperate gulps, he sagged. Who are you? I'm Caroline. This is Barrett Ranch. You were found by our fence line. What happened? He grimaced. Attacked. By vigilantes. I escaped. They killed some of our people. They said we murdered the marshal. He coughed again, struggling for breath. We didn't. Marshall was shot by bandits. We tried to help. They shot at us anyway. Caroline's father stepped forward, eyes hard. How can we know you're telling the truth? The wounded Cherokee let out a bitter laugh that turned into a painful wheeze. You don't. I have no proof, but I swear it. Caroline gently dabbed a cloth across his forehead. What's your name? His name is Little Crow, came a voice from the barn door. A familiar voice. Caroline whirled around to see Running Wolf himself, standing there battered but alive. He'd just walked in, probably tracing his friend's path. A gasp escaped her lips. James Barrett reached for his rifle face, set in shock and alarm. Who in blazes are you? Running Wolf spread his hands slowly, no weapon in sight. I am Running Wolf. I met your daughter under dire circumstances once before. She saved my life. He took a tentative step forward. Now I come to save my friend. Caroline's father turned furious eyes on her. You knew him. She faltered. Pa, he was wounded. I couldn't just... You lied, James roared, raising the rifle. You brought danger here. Baxter and a few ranch hands rushed in at the sound. Tension crackled. Running Wolf held his ground arms raised to show he meant no harm. We do not want a fight, he said calmly. We only want the truth to be known. We didn't kill that marshal. James's finger hovered near the trigger. Caroline stepped between them, tears brimming in her eyes. Pa, he's telling the truth. He was shot before. I helped him. He left so we wouldn't be implicated. He could have brought an army back, but he didn't. Her father trembled with anger, gaze darting between Caroline Running Wolf and the wounded Little Crow. Why the hell should I believe you? Running Wolf took a step forward, ignoring the rifles aimed at him. Because it is true. Men disguised as Cherokees shot that marshal. Some of our scouts saw them, outlaws stirring up hate. We tried to warn the marshal, but he fired on us. Then the vigilantes blamed us. We've been running ever since. Baxter spat. Convenient story. Could be lying. Running Wolf drew a deep breath expression resolute. The men who shot the marshal bear a tattoo of a coiled snake on their forearms. We saw it. Ask around. You'll find the same rumor in the saloons near Fort Smith. They're a gang of bandits. A flicker of recognition passed through James's eyes. I heard of a snake-tattooed gang. Damned outlaws. They robbed a stagecoach last month. Caroline seized the moment. Parsi it fits. The vigilantes want someone to blame. They're fueling a war by claiming the Cherokee are murderers. James's rifle wavered. Baxter growled. We can't just let them walk free. The army's searching for them. Running Wolf met James's stare. We only want to clear our name. If you help us gather proof that the gang with snake tattoos is responsible, you'll save many lives. A tense silence followed. Then, in a surprising move, James slowly lowered his rifle. We need the truth, he said, voice rough. If you're lying, you die. But if you're telling the truth, we can end this bloodshed. Relief flooded Caroline. She set a hand on her father's arm, grateful for the flicker of reason in his eyes. Thank you, Pa. Running Wolf let out a breath. We have to find the outlaws or evidence of their crimes. If we can show the army the truth, maybe they'll call off their hunt for us. James nodded gravely. Then we move fast. The vigilantes or the army might show up any time. So began an uneasy truce between James Barrett and Running Wolf. The Cherokee man tended to Little Crow, who mended slowly. Meanwhile, James and Baxter racked their brains for how to locate the rumored gang. James recalled that Colonel Charles Goodnight might be arriving soon with news from Fort Smith. Perhaps Goodnight had heard rumors, and if Goodnight corroborated the presence of the snake-tattooed outlaws, that might bolster the Cherokee's story. In the meantime, they had to hide Running Wolf and Little Crow from prying eyes. Caroline suggested they take shelter in the old line shack a few miles from the main ranch used only during severe winters. James agreed. It was remote enough that even if someone snooped around the main buildings, they wouldn't find them. Before dawn the next day, Caroline led them to the line shack, guiding a rickety wagon with supplies. Her father insisted that Baxter come along for security and likely to keep watch on them. The tension was palpable. Baxter glared at Running Wolf every chance he got, hand never straying far from his revolver. The shack stood by a scraggly patch of pines, partially hidden from the open plains. It was small, with just a single room and a fireplace, but it had walls and a roof. Caroline helped Running Wolf ease Little Crow onto the straw mattress in the corner. Outside, Baxter set up a perimeter, scanning the horizon with binoculars. Once they were settled, James pulled Running Wolf aside. "Listen," he said in a gruff whisper. "We're not friends. But I won't let a bloodbath happen on my land. You find a way to prove your innocence, or I'll wash my hands of you." Running Wolf gave a curt nod. Understood. That afternoon, Colonel Charles Goodnight arrived at Barrett Ranch, true to his word. He was a sturdy man with a well-trimmed beard and the bearing of someone who'd survived countless frontier hardships. He greeted James with a firm handshake, ignoring the suspicious eyes of the ranch hands who hovered nearby. Over coffee in the ranch house, James broached the subject carefully. Heard rumors about a gang with snake tattoos. They might be behind a marshal's murder. You hear anything? Goodnight leaned back, stroking his beard. There's talk in Fort Smith of a new band of outlaws that brand themselves with a snake coil. They've been hitting stagecoaches and travelers along the roads leading into Indian territory. He frowned. "What makes you ask?" James hesitated, choosing his words. "Some folks say the Cherokee shot that marshal. Others think it might be these outlaws. I'm trying to avoid a war. Don't want vigilantes taking justice into their own hands." Goodnight nodded grave. "The army is on edge. If they get proof it wasn't the Cherokee that'll simmer things down. But if not—" He let the implication hang. James inhaled slowly. "I might have a lead on that proof." The colonel's eyebrows rose. "I'm listening." James explained his theory, leaving out the detail that Running Wolf was hidden in his line shack. Goodnight, picking up on the subtext, nodded slowly. "Find one of those outlaws with the tattoo. Bring him to the army that'd do it. Or recover personal effects from the marshal, linking him to the outlaws. Something tangible." Caroline stood silently in the background, her eyes flicking between the two men. A plan was forming in James's mind, she could tell. But it would be dangerous. That evening, after Goodnight departed, James returned to the line shack. Caroline accompanied him. They found Running Wolf outside, scanning the horizon, as if expecting an attack at any moment. "We have a plan," James said brusquely. "We'll go to Redwood Bluff, see if there's any evidence left behind from the shooting. The army's neglected that angle. If you say you saw the outlaws, maybe they left something behind." "A clue." Running Wolf stiffened. "That's near our settlement. Vigilantes have burned some of our lodges. It's dangerous." James shrugged. "We don't have many choices." They decided to leave Little Crow in the shack to heal with Baxter standing guard. James, Caroline, and Running Wolf would head to Redwood Bluff under cover of night. It was a risky gamble, but time was short. They left before midnight, James, Caroline, and Running Wolf riding under the silver glow of a full moon. James led the way with hardened silence, while Caroline and Running Wolf followed close behind. They traveled light, save for a lantern and supplies. Their goal, uncover proof the Cherokee were innocent. At Redwood Bluff, eerie stillness clung to the trees. Running Wolf led them to a clearing. "Marshall was here," he whispered, pointing at the trampled ground. Caroline's lantern revealed a faint blood trail. They followed it to a patch of brush where something glinted. Running Wolf reached down and retrieved a battered tin badge. "His," he murmured. James took it, frowning. Not enough. They searched deeper hearts, thudding in the hush. Then Caroline spotted it, a torn scrap of cloth with a faint embroidered snake coil. Pa James snatched it. "That's it, the gang Goodnight spoke of." Before they could breathe, relief voices rang out. "Fan out. They're here somewhere. Vigilantes." They ducked behind rocks as Rawlings and his men approached with rifles and lanterns. "Spread out. I want the rancher and the Cherokee. Dead!" Rawlings shouted. Gunfire cracked the silence. James and Running Wolf returned fire, forcing the men to dive for cover. Caroline clutched the snake emblem cloth. If they died, the truth would die with them. "Run!" James yelled, dragging her toward the horses. Bullets hissed past them, one grazing Caroline's leg. She winced, but held on as Running Wolf helped her mount. They galloped into the trees, pursued by shouting men. Caroline's vision blurred from pain, but she held tight. Running Wolf took a hit to the shoulder, but stayed upright. One bullet struck James's hat clean off, but they kept riding. Only when the shouts faded behind them did they slow. Breathing hard, they stopped near a creek to rest. Caroline clutched her leg. "Just a scratch," she said through clenched teeth. James looked at the cloth in his hand. This could change everything. Running Wolf nodded, face pale but resolute. "Now we take it to the army." In that moonlit stillness, surrounded by pain and smoke, something unspoken passed between them. A flicker of understanding and perhaps the first spark of a fragile alliance. Though the army cleared the Cherokee of wrongdoing, Clint Rawlings and his vigilantes weren't ready to let go of hate. They stormed Barrett Ranch, demanding Running Wolf be handed over. But James Barrett, now changed by the truth, stood firm. As tensions neared a deadly standoff, Lieutenant Porter and a cavalry unit arrived just in time, flanked by Running Wolf's band, including Elise and Little Crow. The vigilantes were surrounded and forced to surrender, ending the threat of violence once and for all. Days later, Running Wolf's people returned not in anger, but in peace. Elise offered Caroline a hand-woven Cherokee blanket as a gift of gratitude and unity. Running Wolf gave her a carved wooden wolf, symbolizing courage and loyalty. James, once hardened by grief, accepted the peace offering and acknowledged the need for change. In that dusty yard, a fragile but powerful truce was forged, one built on mutual respect, courage, and compassion. Weeks later, life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. With the outlaws exposed and the army satisfied, peace began to take root. Colonel Goodnight returned, finalizing a trade that benefited both the Barretts and the Cherokee, who provided fresh horses for the drive. Little Crow recovered fully. Though he offered payment for James's help, the rancher simply replied, "Let's just mind each other's fences." Running Wolf visited often, bringing gifts and sharing stories with Carolyn. As they walked the ranch, a quiet bond deepened between them, born of trust, sealed in adversity. James remained guarded, but less hardened. Caroline often caught him watching the horizon, perhaps thinking of how far they'd come. One autumn morning, Caroline stood wrapped in the Cherokee blanket, the carved wolf in hand. Her father joined her, voice soft. "Your mother would be proud." Together, they stood in a silence, grieving, healing, and beginning anew on a land once divided. Thank you for joining us on this thrilling ride through the rugged frontier, where a single act of compassion turned old enemies into cautious allies. Caroline's secret sheltering of Running Wolf risked her family's entire livelihood, yet that risk uncovered a conspiracy that nearly plunged the region into a war. In the end, justice prevailed. The innocent were cleared, and the ranch discovered a path toward reconciliation with the Cherokee people. If this story stirred your heart, share it with your friends, and spread the lesson that empathy can conquer fear. Your support helps us continue creating compelling stories that bring history to life. So be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more timeless tales, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss a single adventure. Together, let's celebrate the power of courage, unity, and the enduring spirit of the American West.